On February 28th, 2008, my husband and I brought home our firstborn, Benjamin Caleb Burke. He was born by C-section at Grant Hospital here in Columbus, Ohio. But just 10 days following that, I was handcuffed and escorted down the stairs of our 4-bedroom suburban home by a police officer responding to a domestic violence call. This is a night that I will never forget, as our home was filled with yelling and shouts of anger, and eventually became physical from all of the undercurrents of negative emotions that had existed in our marriage almost from the beginning. But somewhere in the midst of it, I saw my husband handle my son in a way that set off a trigger inside of me. And the next thing I knew, I was beating, scratching, and plummeting him with all my might in a fit of rage while he refused to fight back. Moments later, the police were at my door, and I was escorted out of my home and placed in the back of a police car with fresh milk still in my breast from breastfeeding our son. I was devastated. I was numb. It literally felt like I was in the middle of a bad dream that I couldn't wake up from. How do you go from being a pastor's kid, raised in the church, singing in the choir, becoming a college graduate, even a successful business owner, and then find yourself sitting in the back of a police car on your way to jail? I was completely embarrassed, ashamed. In fact, I had all but completely blocked out that entire incident and the pain of that night until now. COVID-19 was my turning point. And I realized that I could no longer keep silent about this part of my journey. That there are people who are out there dying and whose lives are at stake. And so I realized that it was time to not only tell my story, but to acknowledge that walking through that experience has become an intricate part of my journey and my calling, and has even given me the ability to sit before you today. There's a quote that I read recently from a copyright, her name is Rumi, that I've adopted as part of my own. And she said, "I realized that the part of me that I have been ashamed of the most is the very place from which my bulletproof power springs forth." Wow. My name is Stacy Monique Burke, and I am the president and CEO of Restorative Financial Services and the ONIONomics Financial Wellness Program. But I don't sit before you today as president or CEO or even as a business owner for that matter, but as a justice-involved individual who's had her own real-lived experience with financial addiction and compulsive spending. Over the last several years, my company has been dedicated to helping people identify and remove the barriers from within that prevent them from achieving any kind of financial wellness or becoming financially whole. And if you're like me, you know that there are immediate barriers that you face when you have a record. And although my record was completely expunged, I've watched scores of people, some of which are in my very own family, struggle to try and make it with that scarlet letter on their backs. I've even sat in countless board meetings, watching people rack their brains for hours trying to come up with a solution to this problem. But what I've come to know is that removing the barriers from without mean absolutely nothing if you remain locked up in here. And my job is to help you identify and get to the root of the real problem, which surprisingly has very little to do with your money, but rather the fact that you were never able to quite forgive your mother who chose her drugs over you at an early tender age and end up stealing every penny from out of your trust account to feed her addiction, and you've never been able to trust since. Or the fact that you've never been able to come to terms with the fact that it's not everybody else that you're really mad at. No. Even though anger is the first thing that people see when they encounter you. But the truth is that you are really mad at you. You blame you for all of your bad choices, for all of your missed opportunities, and even for where your life is now compared to where it could have been. And it's your own self-hatred that won't let you move forward or take advantage of anything good in life, let alone money. When we don't deal with the real issues in our lives, they can turn into memorials where we refuse to take off those grave clothes from our past, and instead we keep bringing flowers back to old and dead places. You know, years ago, one of the predominant voices in my life, he made a statement about the real meaning of understanding. He said that understanding is seeing what stands under a thing. Wow. It's not just seeing on the surface, but it's actually seeing what stands under it. And I believe that that's been the problem with many of us who have gone through financial trauma. We've understood it wrong. We've not been able to see what stands underneath. And as a result, it's left many of us in very dark places, places of bondage of our own making that we haven't been able to escape from. But what if there was a solution? What if there was someone who carried a very unique gift mix of both insight and the ability to be able to say what they see in your life and help you discover a clarity of understanding for the first time in your life about some of the things that have happened to you financially? I believe that you might actually be able to get free. And when I say get free, I'm not just talking about getting free for a little while, but then going back to your pig pen, as they say. But I mean really get free. Get free indeed. If so, then I only have one question for you. Are you willing to be made free? And I think it's a legitimate question. Not just for your finances, but for life. Especially since some of you that are watching will probably be mandated to watch this video. And you may really give a rat's tail about anything that I'm saying right now. And that's okay. But if that's you, then you're not my audience today. But I'm talking to that one. You know you're at a crossroads. You know you're at a crisis point in your life where you've continued to go around the same old mountain financially over and over and over again. And you know if you don't get this money thing right and get it right quick, your short stay at our county or state's finest facilities can easily be extended to where this time around you're now looking at a life sentence, or even worse, a death sentence. You see, I teach financial literacy primarily in the correctional and reentry lanes. And the one thing that I've come to know is that most crimes that are committed, when you peel the layers back to get down to the root of the offense, somehow it always has something to do with money. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case for all, but many of the offenses I see, if you trace it back to the very root, some kind of way, somehow, it has to do with money. So if we as practitioners, as support servicers and the like, are going to call ourselves helping out these individuals, helping them to not only get out, but to stay out, then we've got to deal with this money piece. Since I was a little girl, I've always had quite the imagination and also an uncanny ability to write. My mind sort of works differently in that it has a sort of creativity to it that allows me to be able to look at life circumstances through a different lens. And that ability has now translated into the ability to help others do the same. And it's enabled me to help other people, particularly in this behavioral economic lane that I work in, to be able to see themselves, but more importantly, see their trauma through a different lens. I've been able to teach them how to see the most devastating, painful, traumatic circumstances as a tool to literally rewrite their financial narrative. My program is called ONIONomics, and it's primarily designed to help people get down to the real root issues behind their dysfunctional relationship with money. We're in a season now as individuals, as organizations, where we need to be able to discern the difference between the root cause of the problem and the symptom of the problem. Many of the destructive financial behaviors we're experiencing, whether it be overspending or gambling, compulsive shopping, or the like, in and of themselves, they are not the issue. But the root many times lies well beneath our subconscious awareness and points back to a trauma or a set of traumas from our past. But what makes them so dangerous is the fact that they function so far beneath what we're even consciously aware of. Yet, as literacy coaches and financial trainers, we've gone about trying to fix it by simply throwing information at it. And by that I mean we've tried to offer more financial tips or strategies. In fact, one of the prevailing beliefs in financial services is that the reason you have a dysfunctional relationship with money is because you need more tips. You need more strategies. You need more information. That if someone just had sat you down and explained to you how to budget and explained to you the importance of savings, that you would be able to function better. And don't get me wrong, you need to know sound financial information like credit and the algorithms that go into making up your credit score. You need to know how to budget your money properly, the importance of savings, insurance, mortgage, risk, investing. All of these things are absolutely critical, especially if you are a justice-involved individual or in the reentry lane. But what ONIONomics teaches is that information by itself is not enough to change financial behavior long term. Case in point, how many of you out there own a cell phone or a smartphone? And so it's probably almost impossible to live in today's age and not have one, right? So if you're like me, you've probably experienced a day or a time where you got a little alert to pop up on your cell phone or on your smartphone that says you need to update your device or update something on your device, right? And so if you get that message in the middle of the day, like me, you probably hit the not now or the later button, right? Because you're mashing and you don't have time to shut down that phone and wait till it reboots again. And so the more you do that, though, obviously it's going to affect the functionality of your phone. So is the answer to that or the resolution to that to just download more apps onto that phone? Absolutely not, right? No. In fact, that will many times compound the problem and make it worse. But that's how we've taught financial literacy for years and years, where we've thrown information at people thinking that the information alone is going to change their behavior. But we're putting that information on top of a dysfunctional operating system or hard drive and expecting the behavior to change long term. It doesn't work. I believe that ultimately the solution to healing financial dysfunction is that we first must learn how to rewrite the operating system. This means a complete rewrite of your financial hard drive. In fact, that is what ONIONomics ultimately is designed to teach. We not only explore how your financial hard drive got that way, but we'll teach you a very deliberate and definitive set of principles on how to overwrite it. But first, I want to put a face and a name to these invisible enemies. And I want to focus on what I believe to be the 3 most dominant money disorders that you can expect to call your number during a time of economic crisis and stimulus. But when you hear me say the words money disorders, what exactly do I mean by that? Let me first start by explaining what money disorders are not, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand it from that vantage point. A money disorder is not one rare, single, isolated blunder when it comes to your money. All of us have made a poor financial decision at one time or another. Some of us more than others, right? And it's absolutely okay and healthy to the point that you can learn from those financial mistakes. But a money disorder is a very rigid, persistent, even predictable pattern of financial behavior where you've been told what not to do. You've read what not to do or what to do. You've been in classes, you've sat in seminars, you've watched the shows, the podcast, and the like, but you still can't seem to make those behaviors stick. Or you might be able to do it for a little while and then you sort of hit that wall and then you slide back down that slippery slope again. I was recently reminded of a book that I read a few years back on character by Apostle Eric L. Warren. The title is called Character, the Path That God Walks. And during the introduction, he shares with his readers how over 15 years he would go to a nearby park in the area where we live. And he would walk those paths over and over and over again. There must have been maybe 6 or 7 different paths at best. And so you can imagine over 15 years, walking those same paths would become pretty monotonous over time. So he had to sort of get creative. And he started switching them up and cutting, his own route and path. But he knew those paths over that 15-year period like the back of his hand. He knew the smells. He knew the sounds. He knew the vegetations. He knew those paths. And just like those paths that he walked in the physical, many of us have walked a path financially over and over and over that has become well worn by our walking. So much so that those paths have literally become etched inside of us, where they've now become an extension of our character and who we are. But there are 3 common money disorders that are very prevalent within this stimulus environment that we find ourselves in, where individuals that get too much too quickly can easily fall prey. The first of these is called financial rejection. Now, this disorder is rooted in guilt and shame and even an uncertainty about one's future. It's shrouded with feelings of being unworthy or feeling undeserving of anything good in life, including your money. Where you feel like you've messed up so bad, you've been locked up so long, you've caused your family and your loved ones so much hurt that you don't even deserve anything good. Now, you may not verbalize this, but it's definitely a mental reel that plays in your head. And I know that it may seem strange or even be a little bit hard to believe, but you can actually reject money. And I know that to some degree, all of us want money and even need money. But the fact is that we're all also programmed to feel very guilty over having it, especially money that we haven't earned or money that we've come into suddenly or seemingly overnight. In fact, your brain will actually subconsciously fight to get rid and blow through money, large lump sums of what I call free money, if it's associated with something bad or something hurtful or something evil. For example, it could be some type of inheritance that you acquired from someone who sexually abused you. Or maybe it's a life insurance policy or payout that serves as a constant reminder of the loved one that you lost. CNN covered a story a while back on the 9/11 widow, Kathy Trant, who burned through several millions of dollars she received from the Federal Victims Compensation Fund in just 5 short years, buying breast implants, cruises for her friends, remodeling her home, and treating herself to 300 pairs of designer shoes. I think I even read somewhere that she bought a plot of land for her maid in her native country. In the interview, she told CNN, "I just wanted to get rid of the money," because she ultimately saw it as blood money. Deep down in her soul, the cry of her heart was, "I want him back, not this money." So if I receive this money unto myself and even enjoy it, what does that say about me? What does that say about the kind of person I am? Like Kathy, some of you have experienced tremendous loss and walked through some pretty horrific situations surrounding money that have left a disdain and even a hatred, I might say, toward government or toward any symbol of authority or entity that you see as having imposed their will upon you. Maybe you've even owed money to the IRS at some point, or some type of restitution, and had money taken from you or garnished out of your account, your paycheck, without your knowledge, or without any ability to be able to negotiate some type of workout to pay it off. So you feel some type of way about the government, about the IRS, and even about this president. Maybe you felt like you've always had to struggle, or even seen other people close to you struggle to get ahead from what seemed to be somebody always keeping you down. So this money that you're getting, and that some of you have already received at this point, it may be associated, even subconsciously, with a bad place or a bad person, might I say. Come on. I know that everybody out there is not a Trump lover, okay? And some of you, many of you know that he is behind this economic stimulus. And even though you may not refuse the money, your brain has already associated it with coming from a bad place or a bad person. And so, based upon things that we have walked through, hard places, hurtful places, our brain can associate that money with that bad or hard place, and therefore subconsciously try and get rid of it as quickly as possible without us even knowing that that's an underlying trigger for us. And so based upon those experiences, we often make inner vows or promises to ourselves that I will never ever take another cent from a white man or anything that he represents, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that if that's you, you are a classic case for financial rejection. And you have the propensity, when you get this money, to blow through it in a blink. If you can identify with this, and you've come into a large sum of money through this economic stimulus, what can you do? Well, I'm glad you asked. First of all, you can choose to be honest with yourself and how you feel. You know, you can run from a lot of people, a lot of places and things, but you cannot run from yourself. And so you got to be real with yourself and real with your feelings. And for some of us, that's not easy to do. I've got 3 young boys that I'm raising in my home, and I see that as a mother, the way we raise young men, especially young African American men, many times we don't give them permission to feel disappointed, to feel angry, to feel hurt. And so getting in touch with your emotions, it seems simple, but it's not so much all the time. Second is you must come to an understanding that money is simply an amoral tool for exchange between one entity and or the other. By amoral, I mean that it's neither moral or immoral. It's neither good nor bad. It's amoral. There's an old scriptural saying that many of us have probably heard, and that is that the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Yeah. But I believe that we sometimes get that saying misconstrued to mean that money is the root of all evil. But that's not what it says, is it? It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. So you can actually love money too much. You can love it so much that eventually it ascends to a place in your heart, a throne inside your heart, where you can actually begin to worship it. And I will tell you, that's a dangerous place to be, because it's that very place that will open the door and the floodgates to evil. So again, I think we've got to become honest about our beliefs around money and understand that it's just an amoral, neutral tool or vehicle that can be used for good or bad depending upon who's behind the wheel. And then third, if you suddenly come into any type of large lump sums of money, I think it's always wise to take a period of time out where you commit not to spend any of it for a time. Now, I'm not talking about a year or 2 years, but give yourself a week, 2 weeks if you can. It's what I call a cooling off period, where you vow not to touch it. You keep what you have quiet. You don't tell everybody, your friends, your family, so that they can run to you as quickly as possible to see how they can get a piece of the pie. No, you keep it to yourself, but you're strategizing and you're planning and you're thinking about your next steps. This is a good time to begin to chart out a plan for yourself, a budget, or get with someone who can help you put together a budget that will definitively separate your needs from your wants. The second category in this family of disorder is called pathological gambling disorder. A pathological gambler is someone who is unable to resist the impulse to gamble, no matter how much misery or chaos that it causes. In these cases, the urge becomes so great that it can only be relieved by more gambling. For some, it literally can become like an addiction, just like alcohol or drugs, where you actually crave gambling, the same way you crave alcohol, weed, heroin, meth, cocaine. Pathological gamblers, they hide their behavior. They may lie to their family members, their spouse, to cover up their behavior. Some of the signs for this disorder is that a gambler will have to use increasing amounts of money to feed their addiction and to accomplish the same high. They become restless, irritable when they try to stop. They have repeated unsuccessful attempts to try and control, cut back, or even stop gambling altogether. They have frequent thoughts about gambling, reliving their past winnings, and even planning their next big game. They're constantly trying to think of ways to get money so they can gamble. They gamble when they're stressed, And after losing, they have to go back and what we call chase their losses. The danger is that a person in this type of disorder can experience legitimate periods where the symptoms seem to have subsided, where gambling doesn't even seem to be a problem anymore, or at least since their last episode, until they're triggered. A sudden jolt or influx of cash can be an immediate trigger that can spike you into a brand new level of addiction. Trust me, this addiction is no joke, and it can even lead to increased risk of suicide. Listen to me. If you are experiencing thoughts or talk of suicide, especially behind receiving this stimulus money, blowing through it, gambling it away, or maybe there's someone that's even tried to take it from you, get help now. There is help available to you. And I'm going to post some emergency crisis numbers toward the end of this presentation that you can use to call on and get help during this time of crisis. Folks, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. It's the second leading cause of death after accidents for people ages 10 through 34. It's a serious problem. And men are statistically 3 times likely to take their own lives than women. Some of the warning signs are, first, that suicide is not only linked to money disorders, but any type of mental disorder. For example, depression, alcohol abuse. But the strongest factor for suicide is a previous suicide attempt. Also, if you've had a history of suicide in your family, you need to especially be aware. If you had a season of substance abuse, mood disorders, financial losses, maybe loss of a loved one, or extended legal battles. If you suffered with chronic physical illness or a history of trauma abuse, you must be aware. Again, what can you do? Well, a lot of the preventative factors with pathological gamblers have to do with your circle. You cannot afford during this season to get this lump sum of money and then be an island unto yourself or go off somewhere and disappear for 3 weeks. But you've got to insist on keeping strong connections to the people that are around you, on purpose and with purpose. For many of you, this might be your family, your church, your counselor, or your peer support group. Second, stay in contact with your providers. In fact, during this period of time, I wouldn't even wait for them to call you. Call them first. Be intentional about staying connected to the people who are experts in their field and who can legitimately help you. Finally, commit to staying the course. This means don't break your cadence. Don't be overconfident in thinking just because you haven't offended in a while or had a recent relapse that you got this. No, you ain't got this. You got to keep going to group, keep going to your meetings, keep practicing self-care in how you eat, getting good rest, exercise. Be as healthy mentally and physically as you possibly can. Last but not least in this category of disorders is called overspending or compulsive buying disorder. Now, an impulse spender or someone suffering from compulsive buying disorder or what is called ONIOMania is habitually spending beyond your means or what is necessary. The defining characteristics is that spending money feels irresistible. For a compulsive spender, they continue to spend even when it causes emotional and personal distress, when they have very little money, or even when things they buy only give them temporary satisfaction or happiness. They will spend to fill a void or even to try and achieve feelings of safety, comfort, affection, or wholeness by buying excessively for themselves or others, which can lead to a whole other family of disorders that sort of serve as a dance partner to these, and that is financial enabling and financial dependency. But spending can also provide a temporary escape from trauma. It can provide an escape from a bad relationship, or even feelings of emptiness or an overall dissatisfaction with where you are in life. But it can work like a drug that escalates over time, where you need to spend more and more and more to get the same high you achieve with that one single purchase. When you impulse spend, it's like sex, drugs, or alcohol, in that it activates the brain's reward center, and it releases a feel-good chemical called dopamine, and you literally feel the sensation of being high without ever having to take a drug. But like a drug, it takes more and more to trigger that high. And so a compulsive spender, they end up chasing that dopamine high in the same way that a heroin addict chases it, or someone who's hooked on meth that's chasing for their next fix. The feelings then become an escape for depression, anxiety, or various types of abuse. Some of the signs for this disorder is that this individual will continue to spend despite the misery, again, and the chaos that it causes them or their loved ones. They'll hide purchases from their spouse, their family members. They're not even able to use everything they purchase. They've got piles of new things that still have the tags on it, still are in the wrappers. And many times they feel ashamed behind their spending. But they also feel like that next big purchase is the one that's going to fix all their problems and make life brand new. Unlike other addictions, compulsive spenders, they can't get free by going cold turkey, particularly in this economic environment that we're in. You must recognize your need to get help if this is you. Find an accountability partner that you can trust. This is someone who understands not only personal finances and how to manage personal finances, but someone who understands how to do it in the recovery lane. Now, this is someone who is proven, who you know will be honest with you, who's not going to tell you what you want to hear. So I'm not talking about your boy who you grew up with since you were 5 years old on the block. I'm not talking about your girlfriend or your fiance that sleeps in the bed next to you, because many of these same people will help you spend your money, right? But I'm talking about someone that is able to give you tough love when you need it. This person should be able to keep you accountable to your spending plan, to paying off your debts, to paying off money that you've borrowed, and even payday loans. Yeah, payday loans that you've accumulated and piled one on top of the other. But more importantly, this individual needs to be able to recognize signs of early relapse. That's critical. So don't pick this person lightly. Take your time, give it thought, and choose wisely. Next, you're going to want to limit your access. And by that I mean that the closer the money is to your hand, the easier it is to feed your addiction. So sometimes you have to take drastic measures to make sure that you can't get to that money as easily as possible. There are some people that believe that if they put their money onto a debit or even a prepaid card, that they'll spend less, just by virtue of it not being so easily accessible in hand. But there are times where your brain can even misconstrue that as seeing the money as like fake money. And so you can just keep swiping, and as long as those swipes go through, you're just going to keep swiping until they don't. So you've got to know what works best for you. There's some people that feel like, you know what, if I convert that to cash and I've got cash in hand, I tend to spend less when I'm carrying cash. But many of us know that the streets are a real easy place to spend that cash. So again, if you have to open up a checking account somewhere where there's not an ATM accessible on every block, maybe a small credit union or a small savings and loan bank. Or if you have a relative or someone that you trust that you can give the money to, that it will be in safekeeping and they can ration it out to you as you need it and hold you accountable. Limit your access to this money. Don't make it readily easable to access. And finally, after you've applied all of these steps in the short term, you've got to ultimately be willing to deal with the long term. And that's dealing with the unfinished business of your past. I want to briefly go back to the beginning of this lesson for a moment, and where I gave you a brief description and introduction to ONIONomics. I talked about the fact that we all, self-included, have something called a financial operating system, just like many of our tablets and cell phones and smartphones that we carry. And I believe that it's this system and ultimately that hard drive that informs our financial behavior, not necessarily the information that we know. In fact, most people with money disorders, they already know that their financial behavior is unhealthy, but they can't seem to change it no matter how much they know or how much they resolve to stop. Sometimes they're able to shift, and for a time they can achieve some momentary success, but they're never able to really ever make those changes stick long term. Similar to other compulsive or addictive behaviors, money disorders are symptoms of that unfinished business that's related to our traumatic past. And unfortunately, the ways that we choose to medicate or self-medicate, like gambling, impulse spending, compulsive buying, and the like, they only give us a temporary escape that comes with its own set of emotional, relational, and even financial side effects. But if you resolve to resolve your unfinished business, you're on your way to healing. Again, it first starts with your ability to become honest with yourself and even be willing to, like a child, become vulnerable. You've got to be willing to face the issues that have stopped you and served as emotional and psychological barriers for as long as you can remember. And also be willing to seek help where you need to from people that you know will hold you accountable. Finally, I want to close with this. And some years back, I heard someone make a statement that many times you don't even know that something is crooked until you put it up against something straight. And I remember thinking, God, that's so simple, but yet so profound, right? Meaning that in order for you to move toward being financially fit and financially sound, you got to first have some kind of idea of what it might look like. So before we end today, I want to leave you with just a few short points of what financial health can actually look like, just to serve as sort of that straight measure to hold yourself against. And this isn't anything super deep or super whatever, but just a simple set of measures of what being financially sound actually looks like. First, you want to be able to maintain and keep reasonable and low debts. Again, maintain and keep reasonable and low debts. I know that some people feel like all debts are bad, but I personally feel like there are some debts that are manageable, but you've got to know the difference. Second, have an active savings account. And by this, I mean an actual savings account, guys. I'm not talking about stashing, a couple $200-300 up under your mattress or a rack or two in the flour jar behind the Jack Daniels on the second shelf of the cupboard. No, I'm talking about a savings account at a bank that you can deposit into and you can leave your money there for a while. Third, develop and follow a realistic spending plan. You've got to tell your money each week or every 2 weeks, depending upon how you get paid, where to go. down to the very penny, even your discretionary fund, even your discretionary money, like money you spend on your hair or your nails or to go to the barbershop or to eat at Chipotle or whatever. Tell your money where to go. A budget is not a budget. A spending plan is not a plan if it leaves holes. If you leave holes, that's money that's got a greater propensity to be blown and wasted. Also, when you begin to experience a lack of conflict with your money, especially when it comes to those that are close to you, like your partner or even your family members, that is a real good telltale sign that you're starting to turn a corner in terms of your financial health. When you're not at odds or agitation with your creditors or people that you owe, but you're starting to come into an equilibrium and a place of peace when it comes to your personal finance, then you know that you're on your way. And finally, being financially fit means experiencing high levels of financial satisfaction, meaning you're reaching your financial goals, and very low levels, on the other hand, of financial stress. Now, many of us, we actually experience the flip of that, where we've got high levels of stress and low, very low levels of financial satisfaction. But when you begin to see that turning for you, again, that is a good measure that you're starting to get more and more financially healthy. Now, in saying all of this, I realize that many times we're not going to be able to achieve these levels of success overnight, but it can be achieved if you make up your mind, again, that you want to be whole, that you want to be free. Many of us, we didn't get the type of financial hard drive that we have overnight. And so I think it's fair to say that it's going to take a process of walking it out before you're able to rewrite it healthy again. But it can be done if you walk it out step by step and you're willing to stay the course. I want to leave you today with a short practicum, or a sort of call to action, if you will. And I want to hear back from you. So I'm going to post my email at the end of this lesson, and also post this short exercise as we navigate these new waters, and it's called Breaking Out of Your Box. And so I want you to keep in touch with me and let me know how you're doing with this. I'll also be issuing a certificate of completion for anyone that has listened to and actually completed this course. So again, please pay attention to my email at the end so that you can reach out to me and request your certificate. But first, I want you to visualize a breakthrough goal. And this is something that you believe may be beyond your ability to achieve or achieve easily. Maybe it's getting out of debt or starting your own business. Maybe it's paying off some level of restitution or back child support that you owe. Whatever it is, I want you to write it down, and I want you to describe how you would feel once you achieve this goal. Second, I want you to identify the beliefs, the inner barriers that keep you stuck where you are. Why is it that you don't have what you want yet? What makes reaching your goal hard or even seem impossible? What's standing in your way? What makes you unworthy or unable to attain this goal? Third, I want you to enter the world of what if. What if you committed to removing these barriers? What would you have to do? What would you need to know? Who do you know that's already achieved this goal? What do you think it took for them to get there? Finally, I want to challenge you to commit right now to creating your own new reality. And if you're not sure how to do that, I want you to pretend that you know what you're doing, just for the sake of this exercise. But I want you to commit to start living your new reality right now. Don't wait. I want you to tell your old thoughts that they can no longer have permission to advise you anymore. And don't take them back either. like an old girlfriend or boyfriend, but determined to really break ties with them. And only you can do this. Only you can open up your mouth and tell those old voices, no, I'm no longer giving you an ear. I'm no longer allowing you to advise me anymore. This is a new season of my life, and I'm opening up my mouth to say, shut up, and to shut them down. And then I want you to begin the process of trying to develop your new and healthy belief system based on your new reality. And I'm sure it goes without saying, but I also want you to sign up for my next ONIONomics class, right? I want you to stay in touch with me. Please don't forget to email me your results and also to get your completion certificates. I also, as promised, want to post some crisis line numbers that can help you right now. Some of you may need to make this call right away, like today. Don't wait. If you need the help, help is there. I also want to include some names to local second chance banks. If you're looking to get a bank account and you're a justice-involved individual, sometimes it's difficult. And so it helps to have some bank resources that you can go to that aren't as stringent, I'll say, as some of your mainstream banks. And last but not least, I want to say thank you. I truly want to thank you for your time and for ultimately giving me your ear for this lesson. Financial literacy is not only my passion, but it's also my pleasure. And it's been absolutely that for me to be able to speak to you today. And I hope that our paths will cross very soon, sooner than later. But until then, I want you to be well, and I want you to believe that you can do this. Take care, my friends.